Good afternoon, MME peeps. What's up? This is Mr. Allen coming to you live, and this is a guest speaker.
Mr. Withers, good to see y'all.
All right.
Go blue.
See what we did there? No. Oh, yeah, go green. Mr. Allen, I love Michigan State. Okay. Anyway, we're going to talk to you about populations today. Sure to be very exciting.
I'm excited.
Yep. Here we go.
Okay, we thought of a few terms that we might need to know before we get into our activity. The first one here we have listed is predation. Predation is one organism feeds off another. Generally with predation, we're dealing with, it's a predator-prey relationship where it's a dominant species over another one. And when we have that, generally it's not a fair battle. One will basically dominate the other, where the other one's choices of survival will be to go to a new territory or be very good at hiding or blending in.
So basically something's going to affect something else.
Absolutely.
All right. Next thing we want to talk about is resources. Resources are any of the items that organisms need to survive in an area. What are some possible resources?
Well, we need food.
Food. I think space, shelter, right?
That's good.
What else?
Well,
probably water.
Water's good.
Okay. Yeah, there's others, but that's a good idea of what a resource is. It's anything that something needs to survive.
H2O.
Yep.
I like it.
Idiot. All right.
Okay, next up we have competition. That's when two organisms are competing for a resource. So the difference between competition and predation is generally competition is between the same species or species that are pretty equal in ability, or I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? What are you drawing?
I'm drawing a deer that is going to fight with another deer.
Yeah, mentality-wise maybe. So what we'll say here is generally the one that's strongest in this situation for that the area that they're living in will survive. The other one's either going to fight the situation and could possibly die, or they will have to flee and go to a different habitat.
So these guys are going to go and attack each other because they're fighting over a resource. In this case, it might be food or mating.
And the one on the left looks like he's...
Yeah, they're angry.
Yeah, the one on the right's going to win this one.
Yeah, let's give this one to be Rudolph. There's Rudolph.
I changed my answer. You just made him Rudolph.
The reindeer. All right. So the last topic that we're going to need last term, that is carrying capacity. And a carrying capacity is really just the amount of organisms an area can hold. And so that just means basically there's a limit to how many organisms can live in a spot. All right, so a few things about populations that we want to talk about. There's a lot of graphs to read with populations, so we'll just kind of go through some populations with you. This graph right here gives you years on the x-axis. That's the x-axis.
Okay.
And it gives you population numbers of species on the y-axis. That's this way. And so as you can see in this graph, the graph starts here at 1997, climbs steadily up to... what is this here, about 2000, and then drops steadily at 2000, and then levels back out here between 2002 and 2003. So let's kind of break this down and talk about two parts of this graph. Let's talk about it kind of, oh, that's a nice straight line. Let's talk about these two halves. What do you think's going on here?
Well, first thing, fun fact, 1997, Michigan Wolverines won the national championship in football. It's the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah.
Aside from that, let's talk at the graph. Let's look at the pretty drastic incline as we come up from 1997 all the way to, it looks to be about mid-2000.
Yeah, so I'm noticing that especially right in this area here, there's a huge growth in population, and so that tells me that there's probably a fair amount of resources available to it. There's probably plenty of room to grow. There's probably not a lot of competition.
Good, or lack of, maybe for whatever reason there's a lack of predation or predators that were going for them.
Good.
For whatever reason.
Another thing we can talk about also is birth and death rate. In this case, what is the difference between the birth rate and the death rate if our population is rising?
Well, we would definitely say our birth rate is going to be well above our death rate.
Right,
we're having more babies and we're having die, which I guess can be good and bad, right?
Right, yep. So that's going to cause your population to grow. Okay, then over here, from 2000 on down, we see a steady decline in our populations. So probably has something to do with our resources, maybe our competition, and so what we see is that the death rate has exceeded our birth rate. Right? All right, so this is about predation. we have two organisms here that kind of coexist. Not always good for one of them, but this is a fox, and this is a rabbit. Okay, and so on the x-axis over here, I would assume that this is time.
Yep.
And then on the y-axis here,
that would be the number of rabbits by hundreds.
yeah.
4,000.
Yeah, so it's probably number of organisms that are living, right? Okay, so we're just trying to show you a little bit about predation and how it affects each other. You want to just talk about how the fox affects the rabbit population?
Well, yeah, absolutely. As you can see in this, when we start off between the 0 to 5, we can see how the rabbit population, you can see a pretty dramatic climb there all the way up to the top, which as you can see
You're
at the
talking about
bottom.
this one?
Yep,
Oh,
yep,
okay.
right there, and just talk about how that affects the fox. As you can see at the bottom, if the fox population's low, you'd assume the rabbit population, you're going to see a pretty dramatic growth from that. So it's connected as the rabbit grows. We assume there's a reason for that, which in this case seems to be a low fox population to eat the rabbit.
So like right here,
Correct.
since there's not many foxes, the rabbits are going to flourish.
And they're having a
Okay.
good time.
Now, as the fox population climbs, look what happens to the rabbit population,
Yeah,
it
things aren't
declines,
so good. Yeah.
right? Because there's more fox now to eat those rabbits, and so our population dips.
And when we
Okay.
see that big rise of the rabbits, it's a very happy fox family.
Yeah.
There's a lot. It's a buffet.
Yeah, not so good for the rabbit. But and so you can just see over time here, if you take this over a long period of time, you can see that these two populations really fluctuate and they really affect each other.
Mhm.
And so almost always, as you see a growth in one, it is associated with a dip in the other, right? And
Yep.
so then a growth in the other one then will cause the other one to dip. And so
So-
you'll see them continue to do that.
So when we see that constant up and down between the two species, would it be fair to say that at some point we are reaching a carrying capacity?
Yeah, and usually I think that you look at the top of this line here, and that gives you an idea of how many rabbits this area can hold, as well as a line across here, and it gives you an idea of how many foxes this area can hold. And so, based on resources as well as competition,
Mhm.
it affects it. All right, so we humans have had probably the most effect on the world of any species ever. And so we want to talk a little bit about world population. And this is a pretty cool graph. It shows you world population from 10,000 BC to present, which would be up here. And so, again, this being, what is this down here? This is time, and this is number of peeps, right? Number of peeps, all right? So, let's talk about the semi-nomadic area. What's the population look like there?
One thing I see is it's maintaining pretty steady throughout. You see a minor growth, but not much.
Yeah, in fact, not only do you see a minor growth, you even see almost a dip there, don't you?
There towards the end you do.
Right. It either levels off or it dips. So that means that the resources were limited, or we were already at a carrying capacity based on the time that we had.
Mhm.
Okay, and look at the time. There wasn't much agriculture. There wasn't much technology.
Technology. Yes.
Yep. So we got some technology here. That's what this stuff's showing you: the wheel and other things, irrigation, and look what happens to the population. Right. I think this is the big one here. This agriculture,
Absolutely.
right? Irrigation. You can grow more crops than you've ever grown, and look at the population. A very steady incline. Okay. Here's the era of the empires, whatever that means.
Sounds scary.
Yeah. And you can see here we have iron and weapons and all kinds of technology, and it's kind of neat to look at the curve in this time. This is awkward. I would have to say that probably war would be one thing that's going to cause the dips in here. Probably, this is the middle.
Been some disease.
Yep. This is the Middle Age, so you probably got diseases like the plague hitting, and lack of resources. People were all living close together, and so there was a definite dip in population.
And at this point, some of the resources or some of the new technology might be now what's hindering them, because now, from a war standpoint, it's causing things to happen a lot more quickly, a lot more deaths.
When you start introducing guns and things like that, the Tommy gun, it's going to
It's-
affect your
the timing,
population.
it's-
Yeah.
That's a bad ride.
All right, here's our current era, and we'll cut this short. But you can see that this is a huge rise in our population. It's an exponential rise, and that tells you that your population is doubling every generation. And this is largely in part to technology,
Mhm.
right? Advent of medicine,
Yes.
advent of other technologies that make our lives easier, and so population is flourishing.